Good morning, everybody. Please take a seat. We shall continue our second day here of the conference. I hope that you really enjoyed last evening on the dinner. And for me, it's opportunity to za mene u ovom trenutku da iskoristim naše vlade I ministra obrane.
I would like to take the opportunity to welcome Mr. Damir Krstičević, Defense Minister of the Republic of Croatia, because he enabled that we were enjoying in the music last night. So we will start today with work. Once again, I agreed at the beginning of the third session of the Interparliamentary Conference on the Common Foreign and Security Policy, within which we'll be able to exchange views on strengthening European defense cooperation and industry. Let me thank the keynote speakers for accepting our invitation. It is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Damir Krstičević, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Defense, and Mr. Timo Perssonen, Director General for Defense Industry and Space of the European Commission. Also, Mr. Pavel Hercinski, Acting Deputy Secretary General for Csdp and Crisis Response of the European External Action Service. All those speakers will speak at a high political and professional level on the subject today, and after the presentation, in accordance with established practice, time is reserved for your questions and comments. Before I give the floor to Mr. Damir Krstičević, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Defense of the Republic of Croatia, we will show you a video on the Croatian defense industry.
I prije nego što dam još jedanput, oprostite, riječ.
Before I give the floor once again to Mr. Damir Krstičević, I have to welcome the graduates of military engineering. So I would like to thank them for their willingness to study, and please let's welcome them. Mr. Minister, you have the floor.
Poštovani predsjedniče Odbora za obranu Hrvatskog sabora, poštovani predsjedniče odbora.
Dear President of the Defense Committee of the Croatian Parliament, dear MEPs, dear MPs, and members of national parliaments, dear Director General of the European Commission for the Defense Industry and Space, dear Acting Deputy Secretary General of the European External Action Service, dear President of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the European Parliament, dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation. It is my special honor and pleasure to talk to you about the strengthening of the European cooperation in the area of defense and the defense industry. First of all, allow me to inform you about the priorities in the area of security and defense, the contribution of the Defense Ministry of the Republic of Croatia to the overall presidency of the Council of Europe. I would like to emphasize that our priorities are aligned with the key documents of the Union, the strategic program of the Union for the period 2019 to 2024, the political guidelines of the President of the European Commission, Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen, and the program of the trio presidency. The priorities that I'm going to talk about are part of the national priorities of the presidency under the motto Europe that is influential, although it can also be put into the framework of the priority Europe that protects. The Croatian army is involved in various crisis situations such as forest fires, floods, surveillance, rescue operations, and so on. Member states are can best deal with the challenges through the framework and force of the European Union. Only further development of capabilities and instruments for joint activities and actions will reinforce its leading role as a global factor. The contribution of the Ministry of Defense is reflected in the following four priorities: the implementation of the defense initiatives of the Union, with the emphasis being on the continuous structured cooperation, known as PESCO, investment in defense and joint projects, harmonized defense planning, CARD, the European Defense Fund, which allows financing of the development of defense capabilities and opens new possibilities for our small and medium-sized companies. Also, military mobility, which will facilitate movement across the board and faster accomplishment of tasks. The main goal of all these initiatives is to develop capabilities through cooperation, avoiding duplication and wasting material and human resources. When it comes to Croatia, we are participating in the implementation and development of all of these initiatives. Let me give you an example. PESCO projects, where we develop our capabilities in the area of cyber, logistics, military mobility, NBKO, maritime surveillance, and natural disasters. All of the projects have been selected bearing in mind the contribution to the quality, long-term development of the Croatian army and the requirements of both the Union and NATO. Also, we are strong advocates of the involvement of the defense industry into PESCO projects, and I'm very glad that within the project of CBR and SAS, we are currently working on establishing an industrial consortium which will create a system of pilotless surveillance of chemical threats. I would like to inform you that later this afternoon, after a working dinner of the informal meeting of defense ministers, we will sign an agreement of understanding within the PESCO project cyber teams for rapid response and joint action in cyber security. The agreement will be signed by my ministers, by my colleagues ministers from Lithuania, Estonia, Finland, the Netherlands, Poland, Romania, and myself. The projects in question can also be used for civilian purposes. The strengthening of the European Union and the NATO cooperation in order to be able to respond to new security challenges, European Union and NATO may have to complement each other. Given the fact that 21 member states of the Union are also member states of NATO, it is of crucial importance to continue developing and reinforcing their cooperation, including the transatlantic relations. On the 9th of June, we are going to organize a conference in Split, which is dedicated to cooperation between NATO and the European Union. So it will be on the 9th of June in Split. So far, the cooperation has focused on hybrid and cyber threats and military mobility, and we have recorded some very substantial results. However, our goal is to reinforce that cooperation, especially when it comes to Southeast Europe, which is very important for Croatia and the entire Union. Again, we would like to avoid duplication. We would like to enhance transparency and build targeted capabilities. The defense initiatives of the EU is our contribution to the strengthening of NATO, which remains the guarantee of stability in Europe. The next priority regards the strengthening of the efforts invested by the Union in the area of Southeast Europe in defense and security. The security and stability of our neighborhood is of vital importance, not only for us, but for entire Europe. Therefore, we would like to point to the new forms of threats facing the countries of Southeast Europe, and we would also like to give them adequate support. We would like to carry out structured dialogue and training, especially in the development of their capabilities to respond to security and other threats, including hybrid threats, cybernetic security, illegal migrations, and strategic communication. In order for us to achieve all of these goals, we have to develop the industrial and research dimension. This is another of our priorities, which has to do with the topic of this panel. Dear colleague, the importance of the defense industry is very prominent in Croatia. The war and aggression that was imposed on us in the 90s resulted in human losses, 15,000 dead in Croatia during the war, over 60,000 wounded. And it also resulted in the economic stagnation in comparison with other European states. However, during the homeland war, the modern defense industry of the Republic Croatia started developing from the newly created capacities. Those hardest moments in our history tested our capabilities, our innovativeness and resilience, and as a result, we have something that we are very proud of, which is a strong bond between the private sector, which was the root of our defense industry, and on the one hand, and the Croatian army as the end user on the other hand. We have kept the same philosophy to this very day. This government, from the beginning of its mandate, has recognized the bond between the Croatian army and the industry. This bond has been reaffirmed in the strategy of national security and also in the newly established system, the system of homeland security, which has recognized the partnership for security as the basic concept that contributes to the safety and security of the Republic of Croatia. The Croatian defense industry is not large. It does not offer any exceptional, but it does offer a high-quality product. I can say with pride that our pistols, the docking, demining vehicles, and our helmets, Chest and Bush, have become the synonyms of innovativeness and quality. But there are other Croatian companies which also develop very important things. The Croatian defense industry has achieved very high international standards. Currently, it has a 3,000-strong workforce and achieves results which amount to the value of 200 million euro a year. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the Croatian company Utilis, the author of the project Cyber Conflict Simulator in 2017, which was developed with the help of the European Defence Agency, has benefited from co-finances from the European Structure and Investment Fund. The total value of the investment was 4.5 million kuna. The European Defence Agency has styled this project the first fully fledged defence project which received funds from the EU Structure and Investment Fund. Also, the Croatian defence industry has started manufacturing the dual-use products for which it has received funds from the civilian funds of the European Union. And for that reason, it is very important for us to develop new tools which will be at the disposal of the defense industry. In all that, it is important to emphasize that our industry follows all the changes within the safety landscape, which has changed tremendously over the past several years. Those changes, they call for constant adjustments. And by adjusting, there's also an opening of the space for the development of the Croatian defense industry. Over the past 4 years, the Ministry of the Defense of the Republic of Croatia has recorded measurable advances. The new and technologically advanced solutions which have been created in the synergy between the Croatian army and Croatian scientists, entrepreneurs, and innovators, which have worked in order to carry out the tasks of the Croatian army and the goals of the strategy of national security. In order for us to achieve in all that, we spent the 3 years of our mandate in investing in the most important asset, people. And we have also developed some new capabilities, such as the Command for Cybernetic Space, the Center for the Leader Development, and the Center for Pilotless Aircraft and Aircraft System. Once the preconditions were put in place, we are ready to move on towards our next challenge, and that is further equipment and modernization of the Croatian army and our defense system. We are currently building a new ammunition factory. We are working on developing capabilities of pilotless aircraft, which will be a part of our security system during the fire season on the coast. We are also strengthening our intelligence capabilities. We have purchased a new aircraft, new helicopters, Black Hawks, and fighting vehicles, Bradley, which will be modernized in our factories. These are only some of the projects which testify to the cooperation between the Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Croatia and the Croatian industry. All of these projects are also the opening of a new page in the cooperation between Croatian companies and companies from our partner countries. And this is the biggest opportunity for the Croatian defense industry. This is also an incentive for the development of new armament systems, technologies, and equipment, which is of vital importance for the increase of capacities of the Croatian military industry. The development of our defense industry at the state level also has an impact on the strengthening of the international cooperation of our defense industries. That's why the government of the Republic of Croatia firmly supports cooperation of the Croatian companies with foreign companies through strategic partnerships. Because of all of that I have just mentioned during the Croatian presidency, the Republic of Croatia emphasizes the strengthening of competitiveness of our defense industry, as well as the role of small and medium-sized companies and research capacities. The European Defense Fund is one of the tools which the Republic of Croatia commends, because we believe that it will have a very positive impact on the strengthening of the European defense industry, and that it will also inspire further synergy between the armed forces and the civilian industrial sector. In that, we believe that it is very important to ensure adequate financial funds for the EDF within the multi-annual financial framework covering the period from 2021 to 2027, because this will help us to achieve positive influence on cooperation within the defense industry and the building of defense capabilities. The new text of the negotiation box has envisaged not more than 7 billion euros for the EDF. This is a significant reduction of funds, which does not correspond to our ambition level. In that sense, we support the initial proposal, which was 13 billion euros. Which was also supported by the European Parliament, because this will help us to lay the good foundations for further research and development of innovative defense technologies and products. From the perspective of a rather small member state, it is extremely important to bear in mind the availability of funds for small and medium-sized companies, because this is the only guarantee that the financial means will be distributed justly We are very glad that when it comes to the co-financing from the EDF, there is a provision on the participation of a consortium which is composed of no less than 3 entities from no less than 3 member states. We also held the establishment of the General Directorate for the Defense Industry and Space as part of the European Commission. Mr. Tittman is with us. And this speaks volumes of the fact that the defense industry has been recognized at the institutional level of the EU. In this process, the European Parliament plays a very important role. That's why I'm very glad to see that in the draft conclusions of this conference, the efforts of member states in the development of the industrial and research dimension of the EU have been recognized, as well as the importance to keep the budget and ambition levels for the European Defence Fund and military mobility have been kept in the multi-annual financial framework for 2020 to 2027. We believe that all of the above will have a positive impact on the cooperation between the European industrial and research communities. The Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Croatia and the Croatian Army are at your disposal for all aspects of cooperation which will contribute to the development of the capabilities of the Croatian Army and the Croatian economy, which will also have a direct impact on the defense capabilities and the economy of the Union. I would like to announce the conference at high level under the title Opening of the Potentials of European Defense Cooperation, New Opportunities for the European Defense Industry. In cooperation with the European Defence Agency, this will be organized on the 24th of March in this very hall. The goal of that conference is to discuss and exchange opinions, and the participants will be members of and representatives of EU institutions, ministries of member states, the industrial and scientific communities, and the topics will be initiatives with the potential to reshape the European defense and opening of defense cooperation. At the panels, we will discuss the importance of EDF in cooperation between the defense and industrial sectors, innovations offered by small and medium-sized companies, and the application of civilian research and development in the area of artificial intelligence. And when it comes to the strengthening and development of the European defense cooperation and industry will also be discussed today and tomorrow with my colleagues during the informal meeting of defense ministers. This will start this afternoon, and I expect that over 20 of my colleagues, ministers of defense of the European Union, will attend, as well as the High Representative of the Croatian Commission for External and Security, Mr. Borrell, as well as the Secretary General of NATO, Mr. Jens Stoltenberg. The topic of this evening's working dinner will be cooperation between NATO and the European Union. We will also have with us the Undersecretary of NATO for Peace Operations. We are going to discuss operative priorities, whereas tomorrow during the 2 working sessions we will discuss defense priorities of the European Union, the development of the strategic compass, and the strategic review of PESCO. Dear colleagues, in conclusion, I would like to emphasize how important it is to have adequate funds for development and research of defense capabilities. Every euro invested in the European defense industry is also investment in security of our citizens. European cooperation, economic development, and employment. However, and also it is an investment in development, research, and innovation of those products which will certainly find their application in the civilian sector. And finally, I will have to excuse myself due to my previous commitments. I will be here during the presentation of Mr. Tim and Mr. Pavel, and after that I will have to leave. But before I leave, I would like once again to wish you a pleasant stay in Croatia and a fruitful continuation of the Interparliamentary Conference, which is underway. I hope you will take away some very good and useful conclusions from this conference that will be of benefit for entire Europe. Thank you. Thank you, Minister Karicevic. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Tim Pessonen to address the conference. Thank you.
Micro, of course. Sorry. So, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Chairman, honourable members of the national parliaments and the European Parliament, I'm very happy to be here this morning with you. I have to say that after listening to the very structured and a substantial presentation by the Deputy Prime Minister, I'm not sure how much I still have to say, because you covered the wide perspective of topics, and I have to say that in particular your very strong plea for everybody in this room to support the funding of EDF is a music to my ears as a Commission representative, and we still have to keep on explaining to our leaders and to our citizens what it's all about when we talk about the European defense. I'm very happy to be back in Zagreb, where I visited first time late 1990s as a young diplomat, and since then have been a regular visitor. And I made a commitment to Deputy Prime Minister to come back in 3 weeks' time. And my problem is that I always keep my promises, so I will come with pleasure to meet this industrialist on the defense side. Back in 2003, Javier Solana wrote in his European security strategy that Europe had never been so secure. When we look at our security environment today, such a statement sounds more like a wish than a fact. Indeed, Europe faces increasingly complex and challenging security environment. Conventional challenges are on the rise in our direct neighborhood with the return of power competition. In parallel, new threats are emerging, ignoring national borders, disinformation campaigns, hybrid threats, cyber attacks, and we have to cope with natural disasters generated more or less by the climate change, the floods, the typhoons, hurricanes, and also the risk of communicable diseases, what we very well know what we are talking about today. Against this background, the EU leaders decided in June last year that Europe needs to do more for its own security. To echo this, the President of the Commission, Mrs. von der Leyen, proposed to move towards a genuine European Defence Union. And defence is one of the top priorities of Mrs. von der Leyen. But this is a collective ambition. The previous Commission, upon the initiative by Jean-Claude Juncker, took the decisive action in the field of defence. And the European Parliament encouraged the Commission to step up in defence already back in 2014. The European Parliament took the initiative to earmark for the very first time EU budget for cooperation on European defence research. This was the pilot action on defence research. And since then, major initiatives have progressed, as already described by the Deputy Prime Minister. Member States have a common level of ambition in defence with EU Global Strategy of 2016, which defines 3 priorities for the Union: crisis management, capability building, and protection of Europe. 25 Member States activated the Permanent Structured Cooperation PESCO in 2017 to enhance their commitment in defence. The Union can now rely on more robust structures to plan and conduct military operations with the military planning and conduct capacity. The Commission will facilitate the cross-border movement of troops and military equipment in Europe with the military mobility proposed in 2018. This is a direct contribution to NATO core task, collective defence. And for the very first time, EU budget is used to make defence cooperation the norm rather than the exception with the European Defence Fund. All these initiatives will move us towards the European Defence Union. But let's be clear. First, we do not duplicate nor compete with NATO. We will continue to pursue the EU-NATO strategic partnership. We will continue to look for complementarity and synergies. Second, we are not building a fortress Europe. We are not setting up protectionist instruments. We will remain open to our transatlantic cooperation and to international and industrial cooperation in the field of defence. With the European Defence Union, we merely want the Union to become a credible partner and to act alone when necessary. A few more words on the European Defence Fund. Indeed, it has potential to be a game changer in the future. Over the last decades, EU member states have significantly reduced defence spending. 10% decrease in real terms between 2005 and 2015, in particular on defence research and development and technology. 30%, 30, decrease for research and technology. Cuts have negatively affected both defence cooperation between member states and the competitiveness of our defence industry. And spending has not been optimised. Too many silos, too many duplications, too many fragmentations. Today we have almost 180 different weapon systems against 30 in US. 17 types of battle tanks versus 1 in the United States. 29 types of frigates versus 4 in the US, and 20 types of fighter planes against 6 in US. So, are we efficient? Are we competitive? That we have to ask ourselves. Already in 2013, the European Parliament estimated the cost of inefficiencies to 25 billion euros at the very least. This is inefficient use of taxpayers' money. Finally, the complexity of defence systems has increased, and with it, the development cost of these systems. To remedy the situation, we propose the European Defence Fund. EDF will co-finance cooperative projects between industries, including small and medium-sized businesses on defence research and development. It will encourage member states to invest more in research and development, which will make our industry more modern, competitive and innovative. It will change the procurement policies of member states. Rather than, as normal, buying national, member states will be encouraged to buy European. It will create a level playing field for open and fair competition, bring innovation, progress and growth for companies across Europe. And it will reduce our dependencies on key technologies, contributing to Europe's strategic autonomy and freedom of action. Dear friends, when exposing his vision, the European Parliament, my boss, Commissioner Thierry Breton, made clear that he seeks to achieve cross-border cooperation throughout Europe. He wants the Defence Fund to be genuinely European, a fund for companies of all sizes from all member states. The fund should open up defence supply chains. It will give extra funding to cross-border access for smaller companies, so-called SME bonus. There is a good reason for this. SMEs and startups bring innovation, often coming from civil technologies into the defence sector. The fund will also bring disruptive technologies closer to defence, and, for example, tap into the potential of digital and internet companies. New technologies, for example, in artificial intelligence, can change procurement and maintenance of complex armament programs. It can also bring new solutions in the field of cyber defense through automatic detection. But for this to happen, we need to create proper conditions for startups and SMEs to engage with defense stakeholders, including through de-risking and prototypes. The fund will be complementary to other initiatives facilitating the market access of SMEs. We have the COSME program already for SMEs, and we have also potential in the European Saxo funds to support the number of successful defense-related projects in areas like robotics, advanced materials, and drones. I would like to stress that Croatia has been a front-runner by including dual-use defense priorities into its smart specialization strategy. In doing so, it paved the way for various related calls being launched under the European Regional Development Fund. The Commission will make support to SMEs a priority. We will build on existing networks, such as the Enterprise Europe Network, to disseminate information and opportunities and facilitate matchmaking across borders. With the EDF, we will not start from scratch. We are now currently running 2 precursor or pilot programs to test the concept of the European Defence Fund. In fact, this year we will be investing almost 600 million euros in support for cooperative defence research and development projects. As regards research actions, by summer this year, we expect around 18 research projects to be up and running. Our biggest project, Ocean 2020, involves 42 partners, including SMEs from 16 member states. As regards development actions, the European Defence Industrial Development Programme, EDIP, we are assessing project proposals we have received. So right now we are doing our job to assess them. We received 40 proposals, 15 of them coming from small and medium-sized companies. This means that our test programs show the appetite of our defence companies and our industries, big and small ones, to engage. And we are really looking for what we want is an inclusive European Defence Fund. This is why, together with Croatian presidency, as Mr. Deputy Prime Minister mentioned, we are organizing a networking event together with EDA for industry and research organizations here in this very room in 3 weeks' time. My experts will explain how to participate and will focus on opportunities for SME companies. We will also explain how companies can turn on existing networks, also local ones, for help. I hope that many companies of all sizes will attend this event. And I think this is a benchmark, a pilot, and we are ready to, in partnership with other member states, to engage with similar exercises and events. And there is a good reason for this. SMEs and startups bring innovation, as I said already. And they also come from civil technologies, and they bring new innovations to defense. So we are soon publishing the calls for proposal for year 2020, and I encourage you to actively engage with your industries to make them aware of the potential. Dear colleagues, defence cooperation is also the business for parliaments. The European Parliament is a co-legislator of the European Defence Fund. It has had an instrumental role in determining the parameters of the regulation. In the final outcome of the negotiations, positions of the Parliament, European Parliament, are well reflected. For example, on ethics, it was a concern in the negotiations. There will be an ethical assessment of proposals, and the Commission will issue ethical guidance. SMEs was mentioned as a priority by the European Parliament. The regulation has a strong focus on SMEs and reserves up to 8%, as I said, of budget for a project on disruptive technologies. And direct management was a request. So we do not, Commission does not delegate or sub-delegate the implementation to any agencies. We will do it in-house because we are accountable to the European Parliament. In addition, the European Parliament also has an important task of annual overview and control on the correct spending of the fund and its performance. And this is, of course, where we are at the disposal of the European Parliament at any time, at all levels, to report on the progress made in the implementation. National parliaments have also a very important role to play. Many of you personally have played a critical role in providing opinions on the EDF regulation. It's a very important way to strengthen the dialogue between us and the national parliament. Your role will also be essential to include the European Defence Fund in the budgetary defence planning, because we need national contribution, the national defence budgets to also to be part of the picture. And you will be also instrumental in explaining and communicating about the opportunities of the fund in our constituencies, to SMEs, to stakeholders, to industry as a whole, and also to citizens. And there I think what I will bring back from here is also to discuss with our representation. You know, the Commission has representations, so-called embassies in all the member states. So they should engage with you and organize joint events, also with industry and bigger industry, smaller industry, research institutes, to explain that EDF exists, it starts, and there is a potential. Because I think there is a lack of knowledge, or let's say awareness of the potential among the stakeholders. Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, dear colleagues, cooperation is a change of mindset. It will take some time. The Commission can help in making cooperation an attractive model. The three conditions are required for the European Defence Fund to be a success. First, we need sufficient resources. We need the money, as the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned. Without the critical mass, member states will not change their business model, and the industry will not engage. Without critical mass, we will not be found a mix of big and small projects. And that is why we proposed, with the support of the European Parliament, 13 billion, which is not even 1% of the EU budget, which is around 1% of the GDP. So, you know, it's not that, we are not talking about that big spending. And secondly, we need a long-term planning. We need to focus the fund on clear priorities that can deliver EU added value. This is why we welcome the ambition of the High Representative to deliver a strategic compass which should bring clarity on long-term capability priorities of member states. I'm sure that Pavel, my colleague, will address this in his presentation. And thirdly, we need coherence at European level. I'm new in my job. I was confirmed by the President, and Mr. Breton started 1st of January. I want to start on the clean sheet with my colleagues, really cooperate with External Action Service to the maximum, using their expertise, the very unique expertise, in assessing the projects and let's say, the strategic environment, the common threats, and the work together with EDA, European Defence Agency. I have, to be honest with you, 53 people working with defence at the moment, 53. It's a beginning. It's a very small team. European Defence Agency has something like 200. Also a small team, but of course a team which I want to engage and cooperate with, to use their expertise within the limits of the regulation, of course. As I said, we cannot delegate the implementation to EDA, but they can give the valuable contribution because they are a member of the so-called program committee, or they are observer in the program committee, where they can give their assessment on defense expertise, assessments on the projects. And of course, we work with NATO, I mean, as closely as always, including, I mean, to ensuring that that we increase the transatlantic defense and security environment. So we do this to give the European contribution to our transatlantic friends and alliance. Thank you very much. I was a bit too long, but I'm ready to have a discussion with you, also in the margins of the conference. Thank you very much.
Mr. Pesonen, I would like to ask Mr. Pavel Herzinski to take the floor.
Excellencies, dear colleagues, let me start with what two previous speakers have already mentioned, but I think it is absolutely crucial to repeat it again, namely the strategic context. Strategic context in the last couple of years has been changing dramatically. We have growing competition of great powers. We have challenges to multilateralism and challenges to rules-based world order. We have armed conflict, civil wars, and instability around the European Union. And of course, we also have transnational threats and challenges that do not respect any borders and have direct impact on our security. The scale and the complexity of the interlinked security threats and challenges are beyond the capacity of a single member state, even the biggest EU member state. And our citizens look at the European Union more and more to protect them. In 2016, our EU global strategy gave us 3 strategic priorities: responding to external conflicts and crises, building the capacities of partners, and protecting the Union and its citizens. From 2016, so from the time of the EU Global Strategy, we launched very ambitious work in order to deliver on those strategic priorities. And this is happening in 3 directions. First, we are strengthening our operational engagement through 17 civilian and military missions and operations, 5,000 people, 11 civilian CSDP missions, 6 military missions on 3 continents. This is all under common security and defense policy. Second, we are deepening our partnerships. And here, first and foremost, our unprecedented cooperation with NATO. And third, we are increasing defense cooperation among EU member states. I will focus my intervention on those 3 aspects. Clearly, there is a clear need to turn the tide and make cooperation the norm, not the exception. We are stronger when we stand together. We are also more efficient if we work together at European level, because clearly we use economies of scale. At the moment, 80% of defense investment is still spent on national basis. 80%. Only 20% is spent in the form of collaborative projects involving 2 or more EU member states. This situation clearly should change. The new EU defense initiatives, coordinated annual review on defense, permanent structured cooperation, European Defence Fund, all have the same aim: to strengthen and incentive defence planning and cooperation among EU member states, with the view to develop jointly the right means and capabilities. The agreed EU capability development priorities, which include CSDP operational shortfalls, should continue to be used as a key reference for all EU defence initiatives. CARD should provide the aggregated picture of the European defence landscape, including research and technology, as well as industrial aspects, and identify related new collaborative opportunities. PESCO should guide and assess participating member states' commitments to enhance their ability to conduct the most demanding military CSDP missions and operations, as well as structure collaborative projects with capability and operational dimensions. And finally, EDF should aim at supporting the innovation capacity, efficiency and competitiveness of the European defence technological industrial base by financially supporting collaborative research and development of defence products and technology. While being distinct and having different legal bases, as EDF is under the Commission, PESCO is under the Council, the success of the EU defence initiatives depends on coherence among them. This is why HRVP, who is also head of agency, was called upon by the Council to ensure maximum coherence among all EU defence initiatives. Where are we going next? First, this year, the different initiatives reach key milestones. There is an ongoing PESCO strategic review, which addresses commitments, projects, as well as processes and related working methods, whose deliverables are expected by November this year. This needs to pave the way for the next phase of PESCO until 2025. I would like also to be very open with you. There is a key element of the PESCO architecture that is still to be finalized. This is the agreement on the participation of third states in PESCO projects. Here we count on the leadership of the Croatian presidency to close this issue. The negotiations among PESCO participating states are ongoing. Closing this issue and having an agreement would clearly showcase our ability to cooperate with partners. This year, we will also have the first results from the first full card cycle with a report to ministers. Also, what I want to stress is that the defense in the 21st century is a multidimensional and linked to broader political challenges that play out in other domains, often below the threshold of armed aggression. In this context, we need to think strategically and connect our work on European defense with other areas, such as space, maritime, hybrid, cyber, as well as more broadly on technological innovation, including artificial intelligence and 5G. All EU actors supporting the EU defense initiatives, EAS, the Commission services, EDA, can contribute with their specific expertise to these areas and develop cross-cutting policies in a comparative strength of the Union. And finally, all these elements make sense only if they are part of the coherent and updated common vision, building on the European global strategy. And in this context, I would like to recall the proposal by the High Representative Vice President, Joseph Borrell, to launch an exercise that would lead to the so-called strategic compass, a political strategic document to be developed with member states and involving all EU main actors with a view to better define our goals and objectives in the field of security and defense, thus guiding the fulfillment of the EU's level of ambition. As the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned, this will be discussed later today and tomorrow among defense ministers during the informal meeting of EU 27 Ministers of Defense. EU ambitions in the field of security and defense are only credible and are only effective if they are underpinned by necessary resources. And I'm really glad that we have heard a very clear message, both from the Deputy Prime Minister of current rotating presidency and colleague coming from the services of the European Commission. Let me also underline that in order to be credible, we need to make sure that we have enough resources. While respecting the overall financial debate on the next multi-annual financial framework, the new EU defence initiatives, the EDF, military mobility, and the off-budget European Peace Facility should not be cut disproportionately. We cannot allow them to be weakened and be a challenge to our very ambitious agenda on security and defense. As instability at our doorstep is the new normal, we need to take more responsibility and to address it. We need to think comprehensively about our security and defense policy. The central aim is to make Europe safer and stronger. We need to provide security for our partners, but also to protect ourselves. For both, we need to have the right capabilities, tools, and structures. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our distinguished speakers. We will continue with the discussion right now. Thank you very much once more, Minister of Defense. And we have in total 8 requests. We will start with Mr. Joël Guerrero from France.
Oui, merci, monsieur.
Hvala, gospodine. Thank you, Mr. President. We can say that the funds of the European defense funds have been drastically reduced as the defense minister of the Republic of Croatia has already stated. We are deeply concerned by the reduction of the original 13 billion euro. That's unfortunate. However, my question is about Brexit. We have started negotiating our future relations with the United Kingdom. Several representatives of the UK are here. They are sitting in this room, I believe. My question is this: how can we work without the representatives of the UK, because their contribution to the defense of Europe is invaluable? My question is how to involve the UK. What kind of special status can they be given to allow them to participate in the joint European defense and operative processes together with us? How can they participate? Thank you very much.
And Pavel, if I start on the let's say the defense fund itself, the situation is that in the discussions, in the first discussion with Mr. Barnier, who is the chief negotiator on the new treaty, and his contacts with the UK colleagues has been that the UK has expressed no interest to discuss on any special relationship. They have indicated their line is that we are a third country and we will be treated like a third country. So there's very little what the European Commission can do at this stage. But of course, the strategic importance and the partnership with the UK is of essential importance. And look at the map, look at the history. Can you find a closer partner for European Union than UK? But what comes to the let's say the EDF, European Defence Fund itself, is for the UK to come out and say what they would like to do. The regulation text is very clear for third countries, and that puts the limits. But Pavel, maybe you want to elaborate on the more, let's say, strategic approach.
If I may, thank you very much. Well, on personal basis, of course, it's extremely sad that Brexit has happened, and I don't need to say this in this format with this crowd of people. But this is the reality. We have to accept it. I think it's a big loss to the European Union. Not for me to say if it is a loss to the UK, but clearly, from the point of view of CSDP, this is a very big loss. Now we are in a new reality. United Kingdom is a third state. The negotiations on the new relationship have started, and we sincerely hope that at the end of those negotiations, we will be in a position to keep very strong link to the UK, at least when it comes to security and defense. But this clearly remains to be seen. At the same time, over many years, we have developed a very comprehensive instruments in order to involve third countries in our security and defense, including in our CSDP missions and operations. And I can only hope that the UK will take full advantage of those mechanisms. This includes, for instance, framework participation agreement that would allow UK to take part in our CSDP missions and operations. But again, this will be negotiated within the broader agreement, and hopefully by the end of this year we will have full clarity and agreement will be reached to establish a very close relationship with the UK in security and defense, but again, UK as a third country. Thank you.
Thank you. Next one is Mr. Michael Galler from European Parliament.
Ja, jetzt. Vielen Dank auch speziell.
Thank you very much, and thank you also to Mr. Pesonen, who reminded us of the details of what we managed to achieve in the last period, starting from 2014 with the Council, but of course also with the support of the European Parliament. And I share the feelings of my French colleague that there are now attempts to cut funds for defense and security activities. But let us be clear about this. This is just a normal way of proceeding to see and define what member states are trying to achieve. And of course, there is this development now. I hear that 7 member states were for a cut, for a reduction, and 20 against it. So what I expect from the Croatian presidency is that they try to find an agreement with the 20 to make sure that we get these funds. It's ridiculous to talk about an amount of 1.5 billion euros for military mobility for 7 years. That's not going to work. And cooperation does bring synergy. It's obvious. If we fall back into our old approaches, we're not going to get anywhere. And so that's why I really hope that at the end of the day, we will succeed in returning to the initial proposal. And unfortunately, the defense minister has left, but maybe someone representing the presidency can confirm whether Croatia will be ready to push this and also remind national ministers of defense and governments that this is something where we really need to cooperate, and that will allow us to make important progress if we work together. Thank you.
I think that is the question for Mr. Nikolic.
In any case, I believe that our defense minister was clear in answering your question. I agree with you. There's really no reason, if a majority of the member states is in favor, that we should not push for the 13 billion euro. And this is obviously our intention, and this is what we firmly believe. You know very well, the minister has just said it, that Croatia did go through a war not so long ago. We did face aggression, and today's threats are no different. We know very well how much equipment is needed by a military to face all the challenges.
our colleague, Ms. Nathalie Loiseau, lose the order, and it's right now.
Merci, merci Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais aussi remercier Timo Pech.
Thank you, Mr. President. We see that if we take into account all the budgets of all the member states, we could be ranked second in the world, and we are not the second-ranking military force in the world. And our goal is to be taken seriously. Having listened to you, we can see that bigger progress could have been made over the past 4 years, although we have spoken at great length about various instruments. I would like to tackle some concerns and impatience. When we're talking about PESCO and harmonized defense planning, I don't know if we can be proud of what is going on or whether we should be concerned. Have the countries taken commitments? Have they honored them? I would like to put the following question. Please do not revise the process. This is not what we are interested in as MEPs. Could you please tell us what projects are we currently working on? I would like to reiterate what the previous speakers have said about the multi-annual financial framework. We really cannot be serious with regard to the European Defence Fund if the fund is only 6 or 7 billion euro. We certainly have to see what is happening in the alignment between EU and NATO. I would like to say something about our goals. Big global players know very well what their vision of the world is. China, the Silk Road, the Americans like to brag about American being first. And there's no single American or a Chinese person who doesn't know what that means. We just have abbreviations and acronyms, CARD, PESCO, and things like that. But we really don't know what we really want. We can't say what we want. Obviously, I do support the projects within the Strategic Compass, a framework that has just been launched. There is no way we can come up with a white book on the defense industry. We can't say what our common vision of all the threats is and how we can respond to them. When we look at the current situation this week or next week, we really don't know where we stand, as a matter of fact.
We agree that we need a robust budget to be credible on the EDF. I also agree with Madame Loiseau that we should not be all the time revising and revising. We should also be focusing on implementation. And on the EDF, we talk about EDF, which is to become, is pending on the decision on the member states and the European Parliament on the funding level. Then we are implementing the EDF. We have these EDIPs and BADR, these acronyms, which are very confusing. I fully agree, but they are the pilots. So we have pilot process, and Mr. Keller is one of the fathers of BADR. So we have been doing this to learn by doing, so that when we have the EDF proper, we are really ready to implement in the most efficient way in partnership with the member states, with industry, and with the European Parliament and the national parliaments. So I fully agree with Madame Loiseau that this eternal revision and always opening the existing structures with new ideas is not my personal way of going forward. So that's why we are focusing on the forthcoming EDF and implementation. And as I said, we are working together with Pavel, with, of course, High Representative and the colleagues to be coherent. And I think the strategic compass can bring coherence and more clarity all our instruments. It's confusing to talk about Badr, Okkar, ozone, etc., etc. The experts in the room, we know what we are talking about, but at least a little bit. But then when we go out and we explain exactly the big picture, what are we talking about? When we are talking about strengthening the European defense industrial cooperation, synergies between the civilian and military use of technologies, the new adventures, new innovations, also synergies between space and defense. All this we need to speak aloud and to explain what we are aiming at. Pavel.
Yes, many thanks. First, I think it's really heartening to listen that we are all speaking in favor of putting serious money on the table within the next financial perspective. It's very difficult to know what actually has been discussed during the last European Council, because negotiations took place behind closed doors among our prime ministers and presidents. But what I can say is that the discussions are not finished. They will continue. There are also positive elements, namely there is a entirely new heading number 5, for security and defense. And we sincerely hope that at the end of the day, there will be enough financial means for the next 7 years when it comes to security and defense. Then the second point I want to make is to put all those initiatives that we have launched into perspective. All of them have been launched in the last couple of years. It's all relatively new. And it's, I would say, taking into account the history of the European integration process, actually quite revolutionary. What we are trying to do now with PESCO is to have a PESCO pause, no new projects on the table, and a wider reflection how to take it forward. For the moment, we have 47 PESCO projects, and they include training facilities, land formation systems, maritime, air systems, cyber, and enabling joint multiple services. Again, PESCO is the last three years, so clearly it will take some time for all of us and also wider audience, EU citizens, to fully understand what we are aiming at. And finally, the issue of strategic compass, which will be discussed among defense ministers later today and tomorrow. The idea is to update our common understanding of threats and challenges. Common threat analysis. This is something that we have been missing, and this is a basis in order for us to be, us means 27 member states, to be at the same page when it comes to threats, challenges that we all face collectively. And the biggest challenge from our point of view would be to do this threat analysis in a way that will be not divisive. So it's not about setting priorities, what threat, what challenge is more important, what challenge is less important. This is rather to have to create a common understanding of those threats and challenges. Then the second objective of the compass is to identify more specific goals and objectives in the field of security and defense in order to fulfill the level of ambition. So basically having all these initiatives to put them together and provide them a sense of direction. And finally, to provide extra impetus to those initiatives and to ensure overall coherence. This is not an exercise that will end in the next couple of weeks or couple of months. We are thinking about this to be finalized in 2 years' time, and that should solidify and provide direction to all those different initiatives that we have been launching over the last couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you for your answers. And the next one is Mr. Tobias Elwood from UK.
Thank you very much indeed. I beg the indulgence of conference. I've began my own little revolution here by producing my own flag, which was missing, as a acknowledgement and as a plea to want to be included as much as possible in these events. Okay. A speech doesn't start when we talk about security and defense without mentioning the long list of challenges that the globe, that the world now faces, the rising threats, political competition, and my prediction is that they're only going to get worse, that the next 10 years are going to get more bumpy than the last, simply because of the advancement of technology, but also the challenge to the West. Anybody that attended the Munich Security Conference, the focus there was Westlessness. What is the Western project about? What do we stand up for? What do we fight for? What brings us together? What unifies us together? So I make no apologies about repeating what I started to say yesterday, in that I do feel uncomfortable from a British perspective. I voted to remain in the EU, but democratically I must, as a parliamentarian, recognize the outcome of where we are. We have to then now move forward. We must move forward, but those challenges that I refer to don't recognize borders. They don't recognize the political lines on the map. In the UK, we are about to embark on a huge defense, security, and foreign policy review. This is where we take stock of who we are in the world, of what we want to do, who our alliances are, who we want to work with. It is so critical that we start this with the ambition, with the determination, and the resolve to work with our allies. I'm so grateful to my French colleagues for his comments earlier. This label that we've now been given of third-party status, I'm afraid, sir, it goes against the phrase that was used earlier by the EU not competing or challenging NATO. The United Kingdom is very much part of NATO, and I plead to this audience here that binds us together on defense and security matters separately from those trade deals that are taking place, where I would argue provocatively that none of them have worn the uniform there. They don't necessarily fully appreciate the challenges that we discuss and debate here. Britain is bruised by Brexit, there's no doubt about it. We are trying to find our way in the world, but many of us want to absolutely continue with a relationship with the EU because of the security and defense threats that we face. We are a permanent member of the United Nations. We're one of the largest armed forces in Europe, and we are absolutely committed to those very operations, civilian and military, that were read off earlier today. So I simply ask this audience here to support the process of involving us as you design your own architecture for PESCO and for European security, because otherwise our competition, our adversaries will win. I repeat my request on Galileo, that specific project, but I make a more formal general request. Is it possible for us to design, to craft that relationship, which isn't third-party status, that doesn't do justice to what Britain brings to the table? Is it possible for the good people in this room, I don't know what forum that would work, to present to those in Brussels that are discussing the wider trade relationship and long-term relationship with Britain, to present to them what could be an answer when it comes to defense and security? Because I fear at the moment that we're getting sucked into this vortex of those discussions and missing out on an opportunity to for Britain to fully contribute to the defense and security of Europe. Thank you.
Dear Tobias, thank you very much for your contribution and your discussion on this topic. I don't see that you need some kind of answer Because of the time, I will propose that we take...
I'm sorry, I do require an answer. I would like to go back to Britain and to say that there is the support from this forum alone to say that Britain is welcome, that we're not a third-party status. We cannot allow this to kick this into the long grass.
Well, you are right. There is... I think that is not a problem, really.
Okay,
sure.
Forgive me, I misinterpreted that you dismissing my peroration, my you know, and I'm conscious that I'm making a scene here, but I'm doing it for the benefit of European security. That's why I say this. Forgive me.
Very short comment. I mean, of course, the proximity in geography and values is a strategic partnership, what we are talking about. Very strong alliance. But from the day one of the Brexit, the European leaders, the 27, made it clear that this is what we want. But it takes two to tango.
Oh, I hate that phrase.
We have 25 minutes, 6 requests. I will give the floor for 3 by 3 for the questions, and then we'll finish, okay?
So you take 3 and then you comment?
Yes,
yeah, okay.
3 and then you comment. Next is Pavel Fischer, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have a question to Timo Pesonen, Mr. Director General. I would like to listen from you about disruptive technologies that concern each of our citizens, security of individuals, property, intellectual property of our institutes and universities, enterprises, but also armed forces. I speak about 5G. You didn't mention this, and I would be very much interested to know how, in your capacity and in your institution, you address the disruptive technologies issue that need anticipation, taking stock of what we observe, and maybe also preparing next step. I speak about 6G solutions based on EU know-how and EU technological potential. We see that there is a borderline between Big Brother approach and the approach based on the respect of individual freedom and individual responsibility that we have within European Union. And I think that this is self-evident that not only our armed forces, but also our institutions and our citizens attend that European institutions will address this issue in very strategic approach. Do you work on this? And what do you need from member states? Maybe a push on behalf of us who represent national parliaments, or do you need a push on behalf of governments? Thank you very much.
We take the next question from Romania, Mr. Stefan Radu Oprea.
Thank you, Mr. President. Romania has constantly been a supporter of the consolidation of the EU's role in the area of security and defense, which we see an important component of the European project. In our view, this process should be ambitious yet pragmatic, ensuring proper reflection of the security interest of all member states. The principle of inclusivity is key in this respect, and increasing the cohesion of the European level should remain a priority for all of us. I would like to thank Croatia for the good collaboration which we have it during our trio, starting with the first semester of 2019. And we are content we have concluded under the aegis of the Romanian EU Council presidency the negotiation on a common understanding regarding the future regulation for EDF. It was a tough negotiation with the Commission and the European Parliament, given the implications of this fund. However, the recognition of the importance of this instrument made the agreement possible. There are still remaining issues to be agreed, in particular those aspects linked to the negotiation of the MFF, such as the amounts allocated for the EDF and the participation of associated countries. The fund will contribute to making the European defence more integrated and efficient. For us, it It's also important that the access to the funding is available to all industries across Europe, taking into account the specificities of the Central and Eastern European defense industries. And the question is, which is your view regarding this cooperation with the defense industry from the East and Central European countries? Thank you.
And the last one in our first block is Andreas Loverdas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question to make to Mr. Helsinki. My question is not included in the frame of the title of the session, but it is 100% included in Mr. Helsinki's portfolio. In February, last month I mean, the External Relations Council of the European Union decided the full implementation of the arms embargo in Libya and the taking of precise measures on this embargo. What is the development regarding these precise measures? Have been taken or not? And what is the perspective? Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Okay, so let me start with the last question on the role of the European Union in the implementation of the United Nations Security Council resolution calling for an embargo to the deliveries of weapons in Libya. During the last Foreign Affairs Council on the 17th of February, the issue has been discussed, and all 27 ministers have reached a political understanding that EU should be active and should contribute to this arms embargo. At the moment, the discussion among member states are ongoing, and the aim is to start a new operation in the Mediterranean with aerial, satellite and naval assets in order to contribute to the arms embargo. Discussions are still ongoing among member states. There are still open issues. The deadline, the self-imposed deadline, is the next Foreign Affairs Council. No, this one is an extraordinary Foreign Affairs Council this Friday that will discuss the situation in northern Syria, in Idlib province. The next normal Foreign Affairs Council is on the 23rd of this month, so in 3 weeks' time. And the ambition is to launch a new operation in the Mediterranean with, as I said, aerial, satellite and naval assets that would contribute to the implementation of the UN arms embargo. Discussions are ongoing among member states. There are still some issues that need further clarifications, but we are very well on time, and pending the agreement of all 27 member states, I sincerely hope that on the 23rd of March, the new EU operation in the Mediterranean will be launched. Then, if I have the floor, maybe also to say a word on new and disruptive technologies. Very important aspect is the EU leadership role in international organizations when it comes to securing human control over new weapons systems. Here, our member states are united, and we want to make sure that in international discussions about those future weapon systems, there is a human control over those weapon systems that is preserved. And we have a very important role bringing together not only EU 27 member states, but also like-minded countries in pushing for solutions that would ensure human control over such weapons. Thank you.
just to continue briefly on the disruptive technologies, of course, it's about, as you said, tapping about the potential of internet and digital companies. And there we are working together very closely with our digital expert, DG Connect, which is also in the Thierry Breton's family. So we can benefit from that expertise in our assessments on the projects for EDF, for example, that we are really disruptive means disruptive. It means something new. It means something maybe can be even kind of crazy ideas, which may not never happen, but some of them may break it. So this is really the first time we are taking that step to look for new ideas. Ethics is very important. So in the use of artificial intelligence, the Commission and the European Union is very, we are looking for a balanced approach. On the one hand, the ethical concerns should not stop us doing things, but we need to take the, the concerns of the citizens into account. Exactly what Pavel said about the international negotiations. It's not easy, but you mentioned 6G, for example, is exactly where we should be thinking. The next mile, or in space technology, new space, new approach. And we need push from member states for sure, and to be active in this debate. It's not, let's say, from ivory tower to tell what to do. It's from you to tell us what is feasible, what you think is feasible, where the European value added can bring a benefits. And then to Mr. Obria, yes, we are very, as I said, very strongly, and Thierry Breton makes his argument very clear. The EDF and all these cooperation instruments are for all 27 member states. It's an inclusive process, and we need to be, and you need to be, together with us, vocal in spreading the information about the possibilities of different funding, whether it's whether it's an EDF funding or a Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe funding, structural funds, investment funds. So let's look together opportunities where there can be a European funding together with national funding for defense-related research and project. And of course, we need an integrated defense industry. That's exactly the whole meaning, and that's why we are doing this.
Thank you. We continue with last three participants. First one is Mr. Juozas Olekas, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, first of all, for your hospitality, well-organized conference, indeed, and a very good cooperation between Croatia and Lithuania in defense issue. I remember our activities in Afghanistan and now in the cybersecurity. All of our panelists mentioned our European documents and very ambitious goal. And I fully agree with you that it's very difficult to implement without enough resources. And for that, I am a little bit disappointed, I can say a little bit, for the proposals from the Council. And I think we should do something more to change the situation, to not allow to cut the resources for defense issue, because it would be impossible to implement this goal. But I have a question about, maybe for you, Mr. Pessonen, about, you mentioned different platforms, too much platforms in the defense sector in different areas. What kind of tool do you have to cut this, not to create opposition from the industry? Because in different countries, these platforms create new jobs, new possibilities, and maybe some additional profit for this particular industry. But how we can engage more small and medium enterprises and to unite this effort from different companies to create a European platform for that, and not to create job losses in different countries which are opposed for member states. Thank you very much for you.
Thank you. The next one is Mr. Georgis Papadopoulos.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, dear colleagues. allow me first to congratulate the Croatian presidency for a spotless organization and for including all the agenda matters of particular interest to all. The unprecedented significant steps taken in the field of EU defence in recent years and the subsequent progress achieved, particularly with regard to increased cooperation between member states through engaging in a common military, projects for common security, and undoubtedly of great importance of the construction of the European Union of Security and Defence. Any effort to reinforce European capabilities and the cohesion of European actions and policies in the field of security and defence are a positive step forward. However, we must work towards ensuring that all new initiatives and instruments put the service of European defence will lead to more autonomy of European Union actions in this field. Regarding the question raised on the participation of third states in PESCO projects, such participation should be an exception rather than the rule. The eventual decision for third states to participate in PESCO projects must be in line with specific criteria and conditions that should be put in place in order to assess their political and operational eligibility. Perhaps the most important criteria include for the states to have a foreign policy which is aligned with the EU's Cfsp, and of course to be ready to cooperate with all participating member states. Last but not least, I would like to underline the need for the European Union to remain a strong global player and security provider, focusing its action on promoting peace, stability, and cooperation. Its action should be in line with international law and its values and principles, namely promoting democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. It is vital to reconfirm and clearly state the principles underpinning European Union action. Setting the rules and preconditions for action will define why and how the European Union will act to promote peace and security across the globe. It will also establish the elements making the credible actor which plays by the commonly set global rules and respects human rights, the sovereignty and integrity of states, accepts multilateralism as the instrument to promote solutions to global issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And at the end, Mrs. Eleni Stavorou.
Distinguished guests, I would just like to ask a question to all of you. How do we ensure that the particularities of smaller member states of the EU, like Cyprus, are taken into account within the European defence structures so as to secure their effective participation and adequate contribution to European defence?
Thank you. Thank you very much. First to Mr. Olekas, I fully agree many of your points. I think that is also linked actually, of course, also the question of Madam Stavrou. I'm not advocating any kind of a new platform as such. What I'm saying, is that we need to get the industry working together cross-border, matching to building up the projects. And there, the industry needs our support. If you are an SME in some Baltic country like Estonia, you may have an excellent idea on cyber, for example. Somebody tells you there is a European fund somewhere, but how does this SME entrepreneur find the information, what should I do to try to get that funding? And then the entrepreneur is told, well, you need at least 3 countries, and so how you can get part of this family of companies from different member states with the support from the member states, ministries, that you build the alliance, you build this project. So this is, of course, our common challenge, to be there. I have to say that I met the Dutch colleagues, and they have a very good model. They have a so-called EDF envoy from the government side. And he came together, he's a retired military, but he came together with colleagues from Ministry of Economy, and also he reports to the Prime Minister's office. So Ministry of Defense and Economy together to meet me and my experts and to explain what they are doing and how could they work together with us. So this kind of model of thinking and of course you need to have the Parliament involved. So I mean, they are accountable to the Parliament, and when they talk about money, they talk about the money what the Parliament, or the national or European Parliament, gives at the disposal of the governments and the officials. So I think there are different models of how to increase the competitiveness. And the fragmentation leads to lack of competitiveness, and I fully agree with you. Mrs. Stavriou, I mean, this is the whole idea of the European Defence Fund. This is not a fund for 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 big countries. It's a European Defence Fund for all the member states. And that's why we will do everything what we can to disseminate the information in all member states and to all the companies, small and big, of the opportunities offered by these instruments, be it a defense fund or the PESCO model. So all this together, I think, is a joint project. And when I mentioned my little resources in my current team, what I'm doing now, I'm encouraging the member states to send experts to our team, so-called national experts. So that's, and Thierry Breton would like to have an expert from all the member states. And each member state would send a defense expert to the team to bring the local knowledge. Of course, they work for Europe. They don't work for the country who sent them or the companies in that country. No, member state, no. But together, they bring sensitivities and expertise and ideas which we don't have. I'm not pretending to know, I mean, the expertise on all the member states, by far not. But that's why I want to pull together all these experts and information. Pavel, you want to add something?
Yes, if I may, 3 points. The first point is on the strategic autonomy. No matter the term we use, whether it is strategic autonomy, European sovereignty, or freedom of action, what does count is that we are able to concretely increase our capacity as the European Union to act. So I think it does not make much sense to enter into conceptual discussions, but to focus on concrete actions, on the successful implementation of the EU defence initiatives, while checking whether the EU has good, appropriate tools. The ambition is to strengthen our capacity to make political decisions independently and to ensure that we have the means to lead and to implement what we want. Our normal way of acting is to act with partners, if possible, but we also need to be able to act alone if necessary. The second point is the issue of third states' participation in PESCO. Here I fully agree that we are talking about an exceptional participation of third states. As I said during my introductory remarks, the negotiations among PESCO participating member states are ongoing under the leadership of the current Croatian presidency. We are fully aware about the sensitivities involved, but sincerely hope that this issue will be agreed among member states. And the third final point on small and big states, I want to make sure that all of us understand when it comes to common foreign and security policy, there are no small states, there are no big states. This is an intergovernmental policy. Every state has the same right and the same privilege to say no. And we can proceed only based on unanimity. And this concerns the issue of the third state's participation in PESCO. This concerns the proposal for the new operation, naval operation in Mediterranean. We need to have unanimity. We need to have all member states on board. And from the point of view of the European External Action Service, this is the key. So once again, no small states, no big states. Every state, when it comes to CSDP, Cfsp, is exactly the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Mr. Pavel Herzinski and Mr. Tim Personen. At the end, I would like to ask Assistant of Defense Minister, Mr. Mikulic, to say some words. And after that, we will end our third session. Please continue.
I would like to thank everyone for this extremely fruitful discussion. I believe that the majority of participants agree. There is a responsibility how to protect European citizens. Of course, today security and hybrid threats do not recognize borders, and so we all have to be prepared to address these threats. We have a new wave of technology. Technology is changing rapidly, and it is difficult to always be completely prepared to address these threats if we do not have common values and if we do not have a common future. And this is the future in the domain of a common defense. So in this regard, you have all touched upon the threats we are facing. And the only way to be efficient in addressing these threats is to work together. There's no alternative to cooperation, and I have seen today that we all share the same opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will take a short break, 5 to 10 minutes, and continuing with adopting or proposal of the conclusions of workshops which lead by David McAllister and Miro Kovac. 5 to 10 minutes short break. Thank you.
Our MP, which was wondering whether it would be possible to participate to this conference.
Yeah. Okay. We have today a meeting with your minister, and I will also participate in that. And I will, because this is the EDA is the organizer, I will discuss with my organizer team for send the invitation. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Basmasaydın ona.
Okay, that's what I thought because I know where the parliament is. So, is it okay? Yes. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I do not.
Aha, dobro, okej, greška.
Da im se može vidjeti.
Može.
Hello, dear friends, dear colleagues. Let's start. Let's start. Let's start, dear friends. We have to continue. We have to work. Dear colleagues, 3 workshops took place yesterday afternoon. Workshop number 1 was focusing on Eastern Partnership after 2020. Workshop number 2 was dedicated to PESCO and the challenges of coherence of the European Union defense initiatives and the role of the European and the national parliaments of the member states. Workshop number 3 was dealing with the role of women in peace and security. As Mrs. Hannah Neumann, member of the European Parliament, has to leave earlier, and as we respect the role of women in our parliaments and our societies, I would be happy to hear from Mrs. Neumann her report. Please go for it, and please press the button on your microphone to get registered in the system. Bitte, legen Sie los.
Thank you, Mr. Kovac. And I know your German is very well, but to respect everyone else's language skills, I prefer to speak in English if that is fine. We had this workshop on women in peace and security, and the idea of this workshop actually goes back to discussions in the last 2 IPCs, where a considerable number of people pushed for the inclusion of a gender and diversity component in our security structures and our security discussions here. And first of all, I wanted to say that we are very thankful for the Croatian presidency as well as the chair of our delegation from the European Parliament to make this possible. We had a room packed with people, both male and female, which is not always the case, but we were very happy to see that. And we have discussed on where we actually stand today, nearly 20 years after the passing of the Resolution 1325 in the UN Security Council on women, peace and security. And we kind of agreed amongst ourselves that we have the strategies on how to implement this resolution. We have even many strategies. That we have the facts why it's so important to strengthen gender and diversity in our foreign and security policy, because peace deals last longer the more women sit on the table and are involved at considerable stages. We know that intelligence gathering We need women because otherwise we lose half of the information that we need to make a proper security assessment. We also know that security strategies are helpful, especially then when they cater for the needs of the whole population and not just half of the population. And we shared countless examples on how we failed in the past. But it was also good to see that we have seen many advancements when it comes to women, peace and security in the EU member states, also on European level and on global level. And that was a bit the conclusion of the workshop. We really need to speed things up. Depending on the policy field you look at, if we go with the speed we have at the moment, it will need us between 200 and 700 years to actually reach full equality in security policy, and we think this is not acceptable. For example, we only have 2% women mediators, although we know peace deals last longer when they're there. We have only 12% women in our military infrastructures and even fewer at the leadership level in the European Union. We have heads of delegations, especially in crisis regions, and heads of embassies, basically all being male. And even if we look in this room, and I just made the effort to count the number of male and female members of delegation, it's 94 male, it's 28 female, and we still have 9 delegations that are all male. So we really need to speed up working on this. So what we did, and we hope that the German presidency will take this over, is we said we need to continue this discussion. We need to use the forum of the IPC to continue this discussion. We would like to have another workshop like this in Berlin, where we could present best practices from member states and the EU on policies, but also on how we as parliamentarians can use the leverage we have in our national parliaments and on European level to move things ahead much faster. And we would be very happy if, because the next IPC will be in September, that's just 1 month before the 20th anniversary, we could also make sure that we have a discussion like this on the main stage. That is the message I want to send from our workshop. I will follow up. Many others of us will also follow up. So thank you very much for making this possible. And yes, we need to speed things up. And it's not just about being nice to women. It's about our security and making it as good as possible.
Dear Hannah, thank you so much for your comprehensive presentation. I have a personal wish. I would like to get your findings in a written form. If I can get them, I would be happy. I wish you a nice trip back, and thank you for being with us here in Zagreb. Thank you.
We can try to see how we can present the findings. There will also be a European Parliament initiative report on exactly this issue, which will be more comprehensive even than the panel. So thank you, and you will receive them.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hannah. All the best to you. And now we are shifting to workshop number 1. Which dealt with the Eastern Partnership after 2020. And I'm very pleased to give the floor to our friend from the European Parliament, Michael Gahler. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm pleased to have the opportunity to present on this occasion the conclusions from a substantive and interesting discussion that we had yesterday on the important topic of our future relations with the countries of the Eastern Partnership. The European Union's stability is certainly affected by the developments in our eastern and southern neighborhood. Therefore, it is important to encourage the development of closer strategic relations with our eastern and southern partners by pursuing transformative potential in these large neighboring countries, regions aiming to achieve alignment with European new rules. We, of course, focused on the Eastern Partnership. The current framework document, 20 deliverables for 2020, is an important strategic document that brought tangible results for Eastern Partnership countries' citizens across all 4 areas of cooperation. I'm glad to see that most of the 20 objectives are being implemented, but there is still room for progress, especially in the areas of cooperation with civil society organizations, strengthening the rule of law, support for judicial reform, and the fight against corruption. We are all looking forward to the new strategy for post-2020 Eastern Partnership that will be announced in March. How However, what is important in our post-2020 strategy, and we can take out as a highlight of our yesterday's discussion, is the fact that when speaking about the Eastern Partnership, we have 6 countries with very different levels of ambition. Some of them, namely Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, focus on prospects for EU membership, while others are satisfied with closer contractual relations with the European Union. In formulating our policies towards the Eastern Partnership, we should make sure that the next 10 years are not just a repetition of the last decade. We should ask ourselves, what level of ambition do we have towards these countries in the frame of the next 10+ years? Could EU membership be a prospect? We've heard different opinions, but they all have one idea in common. We should reward countries with greater ambition while asking them to undertake additional efforts to overcome old persisting structures and habits. The European Union must stand as a torch of hope for these countries. We have also heard the advice to our parliaments to intensify contacts with countries of the Eastern Partnership, and especially from those countries who have recent experience of their own in transformation processes. Some of the speakers were of the opinion that the Eastern Partnership is as important as the Western Balkans, and the question has been raised whether our relationship with the Eastern Partnership is geopolitical or only economic. It is clear that the Eastern Partnership needs renewed dynamism and reinforced approach to achieve further convergence in line with the aspirations of each country in the spirit of the more for more principle and in full compliance with political conditionality. In this regard, we are waiting for the results of the forthcoming Eastern Partnership Summit. Having said that, further developments of the Eastern Partnership project beyond 2020 shall be based on deepening of sectoral cooperation and integration with the partner countries. Cooperation shall be focused on ensuring benefits for citizens and opportunities for young people. We need to communicate achievements and their impact on citizens, such as visa liberalization and the benefits that it brought to the citizens. However, as a conclusion, I will repeat one question in the perspective of 10 years plus from today. Are we ready to build a bridge for some of these Eastern Partnership countries and offer an accession perspective for some of them? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael, for this very comprehensive presentation and very insightful conclusions. We are now moving to workshop number 2, which was dedicated to PESCO and the challenges of coherence of the European Union defense initiatives and the role of the European Parliament and our national parliaments. And I'm pleased to give the floor to my friend, the Vice Chairman of the Defense Committee of the Croatian Parliament, Anđelko Stričak. Anđelko, izvoli.
Hvala, Miro. Radionica 2, PESCO.
Thank you, Mira. Workshop 2, conclusions. We were talking about structured cooperation and the initiative in the area of defense of the European Union. We heard the president of the subcommittee for defense, Nathalie Loiseau, the head of the Sector for Security and Defense Policy, Mr. Arnold Migor, and Brigadier Zdravko Perajca, head of Department for NATO and EU in the Republic of Croatia. The following opinions were heard during the discussion. The main priorities of the European Union in the area of joint security and defense policy and joint security and defense policy is the protection of European citizens and their freedoms, together with the promotion of European interests at the global level. The mechanism of structured cooperation has been designed to allow European Union members to reinforce their capabilities within the framework of the European defense industry. The European Union has not developed its defense capabilities, and the first step is to develop effective tools and a strategic vision. The European Union does have the instruments, but it requires strategy and financing in order to fulfill its commitment to protect its citizens. When it comes to the efficient action in the area of defense, we need projects as well as an agreement on the best possible use of the European Defense Fund. The funds allocated for defense should be used exclusively for the projects which provide for the credibility of PESCO instrument. We have also talked about the current PESCO project, and all the member states agree that due to the complexity of those projects in the future, the projects should be launched as two-year projects. In that, it is important to avoid duplication. The responsibility of member states should provide for constant structured cooperation, both within the European Union as well as in partnership with NATO, which still represents the backbone of the European defense. Within the context of increasing transparency and democratic legitimacy, we also emphasize the role of national parliaments in the implementation of PESCO. And as for the future relationship between the European Union and the UK expressed its interest to continue cooperating in the development of the European defence capacities, regardless of the status of the UK once it leaves the EU. There are also some concerns about the creation of the European Army and the influence that that process might have on the sovereignty of member states. At the end of the workshop, it was stated that PESCO and the EDF are the priorities of the European defense policy. They are aligned with NATO standards, and they have a strong influence on the development of the profitable European defense industry. Thank you very much.
Angelko, hvala ti lijepa, and
thank you very much, Angelko.
Rapporteurs, once again, and now we're moving on to the urgency debate, dear colleagues, to our next item. As you know, in cooperation with the European Parliament, we have decided to reserve a time slot in the agenda to discuss an urgent topic. This urgency debate features in the agenda of the conference for the first time, as you know, and it aims to make the conference more dynamic and boost its added value, and to allow for delegations to have a greater impact on the agenda of the Interparliamentary Conference by focusing on the most recent developments. Following our yesterday's meetings of the Presidential Troika and the heads of delegations, we decided yesterday, and we had a vote, to focus on two topics: on the situation in Syria and on the situation in Libya. The ongoing conflicts and humanitarian situation in those two countries constitute a threat to regional peace and affect the safety and stability of the European Union, our outer security. Furthermore, the instability in the European neighborhood represents a challenge for the EU's efforts to improve its efficiency and visibility as a leading global actor, which we want to be. In order to make the discussions more coherent, I would like to propose to split the debates in two blocks. The first one will be focused on Syria, and the second one on Libya. So we would have 45 minutes for the discussion about Syria and 45 minutes for our discussion about Libya. Before we move on, just two information. First, please press the button on your microphones to get registered in the system. And the second one is about our panel after the lunch, which will not take place because we got a letter from the High Representative, Mr. Borrell, who unfortunately will not come. He wrote that the escalation in the northwestern Syrian province of Idlib, creating untold human suffering and pushing migrants up against the border between Greece and Turkey, has forced him to revisit his program. As a result, he had to go to Ankara together with the Commissioner for Crisis Management, like Yanis Lenarčić, with a view to hold talks with the Turkish authorities. We are sad, but at the same time, you will have more time to go for a walk in Zagreb and to be relaxed after our lunch, after this urgency debate. So, now we are going to have our colleague from Belgium, Mr. Peter Buysroche, who will introduce the topic, who will introduce our first item. Please, Peter.
Oui, merci Monsieur le Président, et c'est donc moi qui me permettrai de présenter, d'introduire.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor to say something about this urgent debate in relation to the situation in the northern part of Syria. And thank you for putting this item on the agenda of your conference. Over the past 3 months, in the Idlib enclave, there are both Russian and Syrian forces. Around 1 million refugees have been affected because of the fighting, and also numerous villages have been completely emptied out and deserted. Both Russian and Syrian forces continue to hit civil targets. They are bombarding schools, kindergartens, and this is a truly, truly serious violation of human rights. It's putting people's lives in danger, and it's important for us Europeans to remind of how important, how crucial it is to respect international human law. And dear colleagues, I'm sure that you're aware that Belgium over the past few months has presided over the UN Security Council, and we use this opportunity to remind of the importance of humanitarian corridors to Turkey, which serve as a form of protecting the civil populace. However, we were blocked within the Security Council, and we were blocked by Russia, and this led to a serious humanitarian situation, especially in the northwestern part of Syria, where there is a large number of refugees. I urgently call upon refinancing all humanitarian action and providing assistance and aid to refugees in that area. We also have to deal with sanctions, because war crimes have been committed. Unfortunately, war crimes are still being committed by Russian troops. We believe that international courts for war crimes should continue their work in this regard, and as representatives of the European Union, the European Union has to prove itself as a quality leader. because in the area of humanitarian international law, the EU has to serve as an advocate for the rights of Syrian refugees. We, as the European Union, need to provide efficient assistance to refugees. We need to help Syria and its civilians. And the European Union needs to collect, to bring together all leaders and save the civilians who are now in a bind in Syria.
Nous avons quelques interventions.
Thank you very much, colleague. We now have several requests.
We are a democratic forum, and I was asked by our colleague from Turkey, after having consulted myself with Mr. McAllister, to give the possibility to present the view of Turkey when it comes to Syria. I think it is useful that we have then afterwards a discussion about the situation in Syria. So I would like to give the floor first to our colleague, the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee from the Turkish Parliament, Volkan Bozkır.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to take the floor for actually three reasons. One is to thank Croatia for organizing this wonderful meeting. It was a great success. And secondly, in a way to say farewell to this group, which I have been for 9 years a member, one of the oldest participants. And very soon I'll be taking another duty. I'm becoming the President of the United Nations General Assembly, so I'll be relieved from this post to take a very important job in New York. So what I'm going to say is actually, in a way, giving information on where Turkey is, but also a kind of a testament while leaving this group, sharing my experience and my views with this wonderful gathering. The developments in Syria, I think, is very important and has been the headache for the region, for Europe, for the world, for 10 years now. And unfortunately, Syria and Iraq, because of the aftermath of the Arab Spring, were given its territorial integrity, first to a terrorist group. ISIS captured 30–40% of Iraq and Syria. And then, unfortunately, because the big players were not there at the time needed, Russia came there, Iran came there, and we are seeing countries like Syria, in a way, divided, and some parts given to terrorism, some parts given to countries who are not supposed to be there. And we have 800 kilometers of a border with Syria, and we had faced a lot of terrorist activities where we lost hundreds of lives, and it was a security of Turkey, security of the region. But of course, when we're talking about borders, we talked a lot yesterday. I do not agree with the terminology that European borders are the border between Turkey and Greece or Turkey and Bulgaria. Almost all the countries in the European Union, except Finland, is a NATO member. And if we don't realize the fact that the borders of Europe is Turkish-Syrian border, Turkish-Iraqi border, Turkish-Iranian border, then we will not go to the correct direction. So the danger is not coming from Turkey to the European Union, but it's coming from Syria or Iraq or elsewhere. It is like the coronavirus. When it first came out, we said, okay, it's in China. Chinese people will be killed. It will not reach us. And now it's everywhere. It is the same thing. When we are talking about difficulties in another region, we are not, if we don't handle it correctly, it will reach everywhere in the world. Remember, 9/11 came from Afghanistan or some other parts of the world, which caused turbulent years in the 2000s. So in Syria, when we were meeting in Vienna, the first item was Idlib. Everybody was scared that 1.5 million residents of Idlib will be moving. It will cause another migrant wave. It will reach Europe, etc. And unfortunately, in the time between, again, the important actors were not there. So we had to make a deal with Russia and Iran to solve, in a way, temporarily, the situation in Idlib. In Idlib, the agreement with Astana and Sochi declared 4 zones of de-escalation. One was Idlib, and 12 observation posts was given to Turkey and some to Russia and some to Iran. And this wave, expected, didn't happen 15 months ago. But in the meantime, there's a change of strategy, especially in Russia, where the 4 de-escalation zones became only Idlib left. The others were captured. While capturing, there were corridors opened to let the terrorists leave those 3 de-escalation zones and to go to Idlib. Idlib now is a place where we have almost 10,000 terrorists located, and bombings and killings are continuing. So that zone again became a place where it will be a threat for all of us, not only for Turkey, but for the region and for Europe as well. If 1.5 million people reaches the border, they are already there. We are not opening the border now because we already have 4 million people in Turkey and we can't absorb anymore. So what we are doing is we're trying to keep them in the Syrian territories, but give them all the possibilities we could have given if they were in Turkey, with camps, temporary hospitals, schools, etc. We're giving them food, etc. But this can't continue for a long time. So we must really work together as we did in 2015. The first migrant crisis appeared in 2015 when we saw more than 30,000 people moving every day towards Europe. And we had to find a solution, but the solution was not between Europe and Greece or Bulgaria, but it was between Europe and Turkey. So during that time, we took important measures, and we stopped, almost reduced figures from 30,000 to 3, 4, 5 a day, and it was a success story. But it was a package deal. I heard yesterday people mentioning 6 billion euros given to Turkey and saying that after Turkey got this 6 billion, there is a blackmailing now because they have used the money and they don't need it anymore. It's not the case. It was a package deal. There was 3 plus 3 billion euros to be provided to the Syrian refugees in Turkey to have schools, hospitals, and get their needs. And Turkey spent 40 billion euros now to have these people live in decent status. We are providing 1 million Syrians in Turkey school, education, and all the hospitals they go, they don't pay anything there. They are getting, if they work, the minimum wage given to Turkish citizens, and this is costly. So with the 6 billion euro is not in Turkey. We received less than 3 billion. And when you get 1 billion euros, 25% is lost on the way to international organizations according to the system, how it works. But the deal was also between Turkey that there will be upgrading of the customs union, visa requirement to be abolished. We would have chapters opened, we would have summit meetings together, we would have more Syrians distributed into the European countries. None of these have been achieved, but while Turkey met all the obligations, unfortunately the other side of the picture is not as bright as there. So what's going on in Idlib is that the Syrian regime, having Russia behind, are attacking the observation posts, bombing Idlib and surrounding towns. And so we lost almost 50 soldiers because of these bombings and air attacks. So at that moment, we decided to hit back. And during this 1 week or so, we have really shown important military success stories where 150 tanks were destroyed, 47 howitzers, 2 vehicles, 3 fighter jets, airplanes were shot down, 8 helicopters. So before going to Moscow to talk with Putin, the President Erdogan will have a meeting tomorrow, we wanted to show that it can't be handled like this. You can't attack civilians with chemical weapons and air attacks in order to force them to leave Syria, not only towards Turkey, but going also to Jordan, to Lebanon, and also they will have an implication, they will reach Europe. So I think at this moment, we have to look at the real situation. And I think European Union is now doing the correcting after a kind of a week spent for decision making. The High Representative is in Turkey still. He made very important contacts. And what he said after these meetings is, I think, the key to the solution of the problem. He's saying that pressure and unilateral action are not an answer to the problem. And we need to work hand in hand to address common challenges for the benefit of both Turkey and the EU. And promote de-escalation is needed and have an in-depth discussion with Turkey on security and defense challenges. We are ready to do this, but the problem is we want to be feeling that European Union is with us. And it is not a problem of Turkey, but it is our common problem. So we have to find solutions together. Otherwise, we have opened the borders because according to international law, no country is obliged to have refugees and no country has the right to stop them. And it is an obligation for also other countries to receive refugees in distress and treat them properly. So I think the best way would be to talk and find solutions together. And this is where we are. Thank you very much for giving the floor.
Thank you so much. Teşekkür ederim. Thank you. And now we will give the floor to our friend Michael Gala.
Ja, vielen Dank.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, I think we do have to ask the question, where are the good guys in this conflict? And the only good ones are probably the innocent people that are being bombarded and killed by Assad's and Putin's air force and have started fleeing towards the Turkish border. As European Union, I think there are 2 ways in which we can provide support. First of all, of course, in terms of humanitarian support, which has to be increased for these people. And on the other hand, even though there's this situation of blockade by Russia in the Security Council, we still have to try and achieve an internationalization of this situation. War crimes. In terms of war crimes, we have to remind something that has happened before, which is the security area or zone in Syria, which has to become an international zone. It's not sufficient to have Syrian troops there. There are other parts of the population which will not agree to that, the Kurds, for example. Others may not agree to Russian troops showing up. I would be in favor of having a UN position on this, an internationalization of this peacekeeping approach, with a part that the Europeans have to play in this. That's certainly a major challenge for us, but that's a chance for us to make our contribution here, because otherwise we're running into a situation which is unacceptable. People are forced to move closer to Turkey, in constant danger of being bombarded, and then we have the borders with the European Union under pressure there. Turkey needs additional humanitarian support, but in parallel to that, we also have to make the best of the international possibilities and frameworks in order to try and find at least a temporary solution. Thank you.
Michael, and now the next speaker is Mr. Van Appeldoorn.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. And first of all, I'd like to say that I think it's very good that this issue has been put on the agenda, and also would like to thank the Croatian presidency for this initiative of an urgency debate. I was also very pleased by the introduction of my colleague from Belgium, Mr. Kogolati, and I think he made some very important points about the terrible humanitarian crisis in Idlib and the war crimes that are being committed there, and how international law is violated grossly from different parties in the region and on the ground. But I would also like to draw attention to a related humanitarian crisis that just was already referred to in the region, which is happening at the Turkish-Greek border, which I say to the representative from Turkey is in fact the EU's external border, and this is not a NATO meeting. We tend to frame the current situation at the Turkish-Greek border in terms of a security threat to the European Union, but I would like to stress that it's in the first instance the security of those refugees which is at stake. So we're facing not only a horrible humanitarian crisis in Idlib, but also with respect to those people, refugees, who are now trapped between Turkey, which is sending them across the border, and Greece, which is stopping them and refusing to admit them to asylum procedures, even though arguably they are required to do so under both European and international law. And what Turkey is doing is clearly unacceptable in the form of blackmail, and we've earlier on seen the illegal invasion by Turkey of Syria. But I would like to emphasize that the EU also has its own moral responsibilities and legal obligations with respect to these refugees that are now caught in this trap. And finally, if I may, I would like to draw my colleagues' attention to a statement that was made yesterday by the Human Rights Commissioner of the Council of Europe, Ms. Dunja Mijatović, who has also called upon member states, given the dire situation between the Turkish and Greek border, to refrain from any further action, I quote her now, which leads to vulnerable people ending up in a humanitarian and human rights emergency. And she's concerned by the closure of border posts by Greece, which has been followed by other member states. So I think that I'd like to also bring that point into the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Colleague from the Netherlands. Next is Mr. Pavel Fischer from the Czech Republic.
Thank you very much for the floor, and thank you for bringing this topic on the table. If we try to describe why Russia stays engaged in Syria, we will have very quickly several arguments or reasons why they stay in the region. Because first, it is an open door to the region which is of strategic importance in the very close neighborhood of NATO and of EU. Second, they wanted to stop in a very clear manner revolutions which took place before. Three, they needed a playground where new arms could be tested. And this is the case, for instance, with drones or other new generation weaponry tested on the ground. Four, they wanted to fight Islamists far away from their border. By the way, many Chechen fighters are also in the region. And last but not least, secure Assad leadership. And without Assad, Syria will have difficulty to have a future. So I think that we are in a very difficult situation because, as my colleague said already, we need that the United Nations Security Council could address this complexity. And I think that not only European Union is challenged, not only NATO countries with deployment of arms of mass destruction is challenged, but also UN Security Council system based on international law is challenged. I would be very much interested by the reading of our colleagues who have the seat in the Security Council, how they read recent attempts to bring it to the table there, because we are concerned all this is in a very close neighborhood of ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pavel. Now we're moving to Greece, to our friend Andreas Loverdos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the floor for the agenda. I gathered my arguments in 5 points. We, as Greeks, we support Syria's unity, national sovereignty, and, of course, territorial integrity. That's why the second point is that we believe that the Turkish invasion in Syria constitutes a violation of the international and European law. And it is daily more obvious, my dear colleagues, that this invasion plays a destabilizing role for the security of the whole region. The third point is that there is no alternatives, according to our approach, to the full implementation of the United Nations Security Council's Resolution 2254. The fourth point is that we fully support the efforts of the United Nations Special Envoy, Mr. Pedersen's. And as a last point, I would like to underscore that there is no any relation between the war in Idlib and the events in the Greek-European borders with the foreign organized illegal migrants, illegal migration. And as a piece of information, this is my last word, only the 10% of the people who try to cross the borders and they have been arrested, only the 10% are people who are coming from Syria. The rest, 90%, are people who are coming from Pakistan, from Afghanistan, and elsewhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andreas. And now we're moving to Italy, to our friend Martina Grande.
Thank you very much. Well, I will start by trying to, put the light a bit on what actually politically the European Union can do. And I guess that the war is not the point, is not the purpose of this meeting. I mean, we have just a couple of minutes to discuss, so it won't be the case. But I think that when we analyze the causes and effects of this war, we need to include, obviously, the migration, the destabilization of the region, obviously the death of many people, and the violation of human rights. So since, as our colleagues were saying, this war is spreading in different ways everywhere in Europe and in the world, unfortunately, what can we do as European Union? I think that internally, as European members, we need to support all those countries that are in need, either politically or economically. Anyone that needs help, we need to find a solution as Europe and being able to support them. At the same time, we need to ensure that the human rights are respected everywhere, as much as possible within the European borders. And also, we should try to implement, for instance, the European humanitarian corridors, which is something that has been done at European level and that could help try to address at least some violation of human rights. Lastly, I would like to underline the fact that we should also be able to show to the outside world, so not just internally, but also what we can do abroad, that we are one, that we are able also to talk with one voice and also lead in the region. Obviously, in this case, we need a broader help, a larger United Nations coordination, but Europe needs also to talk with one voice and be able to address the point altogether. Thank you.
Grazie mille. Et nous avons maintenant la dernière intervenante, Nathalie Loiseau.
Thank you very much, our colleague from France. I would like to express my full solidarity with Greece I know that the President of the Commission went yesterday there in order to demonstrate their full solidarity. The European Union bears no responsibility for the Syrian disaster, and Croatia cannot be held hostage. So we cannot manipulate by human misery and promise something to these poor people. However, the European Union cannot remain indifferent towards what is happening in Syria. The first disaster is that Syria is in the hands of the Bashar al-Assad. And let's do not forget that jihadists and terrorists are located in Syria, and they attack even some locations in the European Union. In Syria, there are too many regional actors who believe that they can act military in their benefit. Russia, Iran, and Turkey. Turkey is our ally from NATO. Turkey intervened in Russia without agreeing this with partners, so it needs to suffer huge losses today. Syria has not become stable. Turkey is not safe today, so the biggest price is borne by civilians, Kurds primarily, which are in the poorest situation, and they are our allies in fighting Islamic State. Today, in the European Union, we are not faced with migrant crisis. Rather, it is a response to the escalation of the problems in Syria. There is a certain number of problems which should be tackled. We should establish non-flight zones above Idlib. A security zone at the north of Syria is a very important element. And please, let's do not forget that in 2013, the American president decided that he will not intervene, and the European Union is today the only actor who can reduce violence, and therefore we should become more engaged. Hvala, Natali, i hvala svim govornicima na zanimljivim uvidima. Sada prelazimo na drugi blok pitanja. Mi smo disciplinirani, učinkoviti, te mislim da ćemo moći voditi dobro strukturiranu raspravu. I kada se radi
Again, to give the floor to our friend from Italy, Marta Grande, to introduce the topic. Please.
Thank you very much. Yes, we now move to another destabilized region, to another one, to the Libyan one. The delegation of Cyprus, France, Greece, Italy, Malta, Portugal, and Spain met in Cyprus some months ago to discuss specifically what it is happening in Libya and to try and bring a proposal here to discuss about this great issue that has consequences not just in the Mediterranean but with all the European Union. As we all know, Libya it's a destabilized country where there's a common traffic of human beings, of traffic of arms, of organs, and everything is waiting to find a solution. It has been going on for years, and the European Union needs to address the issue in the fastest and best way possible. Obviously, the security and stability has consequences in all member states. In some points in time, some countries have been more interested than others. But over the years, we have seen that this war has had consequences everywhere. We decided also to amend some of the points that we will be voting later on, specifically on the point 13, where we wanted to underline specifically the need to keep the unity of Libya, which is fundamental in order to find also a common solution, as well as keeping a constant dialogue between the parties, because obviously in a place where you have practically a civil war, it is necessary to keep the dialogue between everybody. and at the same time to support the launch of a new operation in the Mediterranean Sea, so the new Sophia mission. That is something that will probably be in the next months, technical and real aspect of I mean, the policy of dealing with the Libyan crisis. So this is more or less what we've been talking on, and so I'm opening the discussion to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marta, for this interesting presentation. And I'm giving the floor to our friend Hatzi Vasileiou.
Thank you, Miro. The Syrian crisis appears to be interconnected with a broader crisis due to the reckless actions of specific actors in the region, like the situation in Libya, for example. Greece shares borders with this unstable nation. Thus, the Libyan crisis affects the security of both Greece and Europe. Berlin was an important step forward. All parties involved agreed that the solution cannot be a military one. Yet, some parties do not respect this position. Turkey, the common denominator in both Syrian and Libyan crises, blatantly interferes in the Libyan civil war. The Turkish violation of the arms embargo and the MOU on maritime zones between Ankara and Tripoli increase the regional instability and violates third countries' sovereign rights. The delimitation of the exclusive economic zone between Turkey and Libya is absolutely illegal and geographically preposterous, as they do not have opposing coasts. Turkey's argument that the Greek islands do not have a continental shelf and, as a consequence, an exclusive economic zone is not consistent with the law of the sea and cannot be tolerated by the international community and, of course, the European Union. Ankara's destabilizing interference in our region turns into a security problem for Europe as a whole. We have to make it clear to Turkey that this attitude cannot be perpetuated. We strongly support dialogue, but we cannot allow anyone to violate their sovereign rights and thus the freedom of European or any other state. We call for a sincere cooperation in the Mediterranean region on the basis of our common European values. Libya could be a good chance of common action, but only with those that respect the national law and agreements. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear colleague. As I can see, there are no further requests to take the floor. So David and I, we were right yesterday when we felt that Syria might be more interesting. Thank you for this very fruitful debate, this fruitful discussion. I believe this format has proven to be useful, and I very much hope that our German friends will continue with this model and keep this idea of an urgency debate alive. So we are moving to the next item on our agenda, and that is the adoption of conclusions. Some of you might be quite hungry and would like to have something to eat, lunch, but there is still this important issue of adopting conclusions. We spoke about our view why to go for it. Not everybody is convinced that we need conclusions, but we have received from the majority of the delegations a positive feedback. So we have reached an agreement on a compromise text at the meeting of the heads of delegations. There were 2 more amendments. I believe that the text is very balanced and that it reflects the perspectives of all our delegations. So if there are no further remarks from your side, can we consider the conclusions to be adopted? Yes? So, dear colleagues, we have shown that we are strong, that we can be united, and that we can work together, that we can unite our ideas and be strong as members of parliament from the member states and members of the European Parliament. It's a big achievement. It was really a pleasure to have you, and I would like to our friend David to say a few words.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, just a few brief remarks from my side. Let me first of all, and I would like to do this on behalf of all participants who don't come from Croatia, really thank our Croatian friends for hosting us in Zagreb. Thank you so much, Miro, Igor, and all others involved. It was a great pleasure to chair this conference together with Igor and Miro, and I would really like to thank the staff of the Croatian Parliament who have been very committed and professional behind the scenes. Now, I believe that we experienced some very interesting and engaging debates despite the challenging circumstances. A lot of colleagues who wanted to attend weren't able finally to come to Zagreb. I also observed that the Croatian presidency introduced some innovative elements which made this IPC more lively. In particular, I do think it was a good idea to introduce a debate on a current topic, as we just experienced on the debate on Syria and Libya. So this allows us to react more to latest developments, and I think this tradition should be continued at future IPCs. I would also like to commend the Croatian presidency for the decision to reintroduce conclusions. I was rather astonished how smooth this all went. I would like to thank all of you that we adopted, from my point of view, ambitious but also very balanced text which adds real value to this conference. Finally, I would like to make an announcement on behalf of the upcoming German presidency of the IPC, and I will now continue to speak in German.
Dear colleagues, on behalf of the head of the German IPC delegation, Dietmar Niethan, who unfortunately is unable to attend this conference because he's ill, and also in my capacity as a member of the Troika, I'd like to cordially welcome you to the next IPC, devoted to common foreign and security policy as well as defense policy. I'd like to invite you to our upcoming event in Berlin. We'll meet from the 3rd to the 5th of September in Berlin, well, from the eve of the 3rd of September until the 5th of September. Now, we will meet in the Reichstag's building, which is, of course, a historic site. The German Bundestag will welcome us 30 years after German reunification. While the German Bundestag delegation is still present here, the German delegation and myself, we're very much looking forward to continuing our discussions in Berlin, the German capital. I think that the past few days in Zagreb have shown that it's very, very important to continue the dialogue in order to touch on the future of common foreign and security policy as well as defense policy. With this in mind, I'd like to say I'm very much looking forward to meeting you all in Berlin, and on behalf of the European Parliament, I would like to thank you very much for this excellent cooperation we've enjoyed here in Zagreb. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, David. And I will close the conference by switching to my mother tongue in Croatian. Svima vama.
I would like to thank all of you for coming to Zagreb. I hope that you've had a pleasant time here in Zagreb, in Croatia, that we have showed seriousness in preparing this conference. I would like to thank my colleague, Mr. Dragovan, and my colleague Stričak for their cooperation. I would like to thank all of the staff of the Secretariat of the Croatian Parliament who have worked day and night for months preparing for this conference. So let's give them a round of applause for having been so successful in preparing this conference. And this also includes the interpreters who are sitting in the back of the room, who have done a great job assisting us in understanding each other. And in conclusion, I would like to say that we owe a big thank you for our security officers who have done everything to make the conference as safe as possible. So, an applause for them once again. Thank you very much for coming. I wish you all a safe return to your countries. Let's continue to cooperate in the European Union. But before that, I invite you to the 17th floor, where we can continue talking over lunch. And once again, thank you and all the best. Cheers.
Sehr gut. Sehr gut, so macht man das.